Today's episode, we have a special guest, Paige Caldwell, Strategic Enterprise SDR at Alation.
Learn her strategies on how to be a top-performing enterprise rep as she shares key account resources that can help you be successful. Your success is our success, so let's get started.
From the heart of Silicon Valley in beautiful San Francisco, California, welcome to the SDR Live podcast with Marcos and Andy.
Awesome. On today's show, we have Paige Caldwell. Paige, welcome to the SDR Live.
Guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're super pumped up. I mean, this is one of our most exciting episodes because you're working, these enterprise accounts, and we really want to deliver some of the value that you had. And so, I guess as one of the first questions that I would ask is, where are you currently working? What's your role? And we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I work at Alation. I've been there for about a year, just over a year. And I started as an inbound SDR, and I'm now in a target account SDR role. And so I work with some of our biggest enterprise accounts, our most desirable targets, and I work really closely with AEs to get into those accounts.
That's awesome. And I'm sure you've absolutely crushed it at your role. So I'm just curious from awards perspective. I know they call you the Queen of the East. Oh my gosh, that is awesome. But what is your best quarter or month you've ever had from a percentage standpoint?
We have a pretty aggressive quota. My best quarter has been just around 115% attainment.
That's amazing.
Yeah, especially for a strategic account.
Yeah.
SDR too. That's really impressive. Any big enterprise names that you're allowed to share?
I sourced Hulu at our company, and that was a pretty amazing thing. Definitely a great logo for us. And then another account that I sourced was Slice. It's lesser known, but it was just named by CB Insights as it's probably going to be a unicorn pretty shortly. So excited about that one as well.
Wow. I mean, Hulu, that's under Disney, correct?
It is, yes. And that was actually in my first month of working when I really didn't know anything. It was a call that I made on my birthday, a cold call that I made on my birthday, and it ended up, reigniting conversations with them, and it ended up closing this year, actually.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of what my VP tells the new SDRs. They say that in your first 1 to 3 months, you're the most dangerous right now because you don't really know the product. So you can just ask great questions that don't lead you to just product pitching or just word vomiting all over the prospect, but you just ask these questions so that you can get into discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. That was an exciting one.
And then on top of this, just to mention this, excuse me, to the audience, is that you're sourcing, but that's actually closing as well. So that's the holy grail of SDR work when you could actually source and then your AE could close it. That means you open that opportunity. So massive props to bringing a new logo in. Awesome. Well, today's, episode is about how to work better enterprise accounts and really get an idea from, what a top performer is doing. And so we'd love to get your insights. And if you could share your screen, that'd be great.
All right, guys, let's get started then. Today, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how you can make the leap from SMB to enterprise sales development, how I did that, and some best practices on how to be successful.
Great. And before you kind of share the strategies, can you give kind of our audience a little background about how big was the sales team, how many was inbound, how many was outbound, et cetera?
Sure. Our team is now consisting of 4 inbound reps, and we have 6 outbound reps, and we So the inbound reps handle all of the inbound leads from any account that's not named, and our outbound reps have a list of targets that we are going after in tandem with our respective AEs, and we also get inbound leads, any inbound leads that come in for those accounts. And so our main focus is on what we refer to as VIP leads. And so those are going to be our most sought after people that we want to speak with. They're going to be decision makers, buyers, or the new role that's come out, deputy buyer, which is someone who's basically been tasked with leading an evaluation, a software evaluation. So those are the people that we want to talk to the most, and that's who I'm tasked with reaching out to.
Awesome.
And so so my prospecting philosophy is really a three-pronged approach, and I start with research and go into targeted lead list building, and then targeted outreach. And so I'll just go over quickly how both of those look like, starting with the research. So the research should answer what we refer to as the 3 whys. And so that's going to be why buy, why us, and why now. And so the way we answer those questions is going to be through looking through some of the documents that companies file with the SEC. The most popular one is the 10K, and I just took a screen grab of an account that I'm currently working, and this is basically a breakdown of what their business segments are and their revenue sources, so you can begin to get an idea of what's what in the account and start to sort of map out your approach to that. And so just wanted to quickly bring up as an example the full 10K, just so I know when I first started looking at 10Ks, I was like, what is this? I got zero value from it because I really didn't know what to look for. And so I think it's important to have a little bit of a plan. And so whenever I go in, the first part is going to be super relevant just because it breaks down exactly how the company is laid out and gives into detail about what those sort of priorities are in each segment and what they handle as far as, what their tasks are. And another great part of the 10K is going to be the competition area. So every company has competition, and this part really goes into how they win against their competition. For example, I go after a lot of pharma companies, and pharma companies are always in competition with each other to discover drugs and cures to diseases and things like that. And so making sure that they have the most cutting edge technology so that they can make those discoveries quicker is really important to them. So that's one way that you can take from a 10K, a high level idea, and make it personalized to the various personas that you reach out to.
Wow. And so can you go back to the 10K? Curious on this. It's many pages, so you're just focusing on like these first couple pages, and then I think you might show this like later, but what is your mindset? Are you trying to find like specific sentences that you could reference in an email, or like what would you say like you're searching for here?
Well, I can share another document with you guys just really quick. One that I make sometimes when I start working an account is this 10K takeaway. And so this is one that I made for an account that I worked. And so this is what I pulled from that 10K. And so they included their 4 key capital allocation priorities. So this is where they're spending money this year. And so they're investing in growth opportunities. They're investing in being competitive and pursuing mergers and acquisitions, which is relevant to my company whenever mergers and acquisitions happen. And so I can just get an idea what's important to them. This is more for my personal information. You might not bring this up in an email, you might not bring it up in a conversation, but when you talk about knowing your prospect better than they know themselves, this is how you can do that. And so different things like this, again, how they win against their competition, and then some areas of innovation that they are pursuing this year. So all of that is relevant to me in that I know what they're doing, I know what's important to them, and it just helps with, having that visibility into, a comprehensive knowledge of your account.
That's amazing. And just another tip, if you can go back to the 10K, I also use 10Ks quite a bit on the bigger strategic enterprise accounts. And funny that you bring up mergers and acquisitions, because that's actually one of the Inside View's business trigger. So I also recommend, like, a lot of times I'll control F and search for like mergers and acquisitions within like this 30-page document. I remember like the first time looking at this, it's 30 pages and you can waste 2 hours on it and not really get much from it. So if you control F specific business triggers, that will also bring you to specific points too.
Absolutely. There's a section on risk factors as well, which is going to be relevant. Things that they're looking out for when you talk about bringing value to them, where they see their risk happening. If you have a tool that can potentially solve that for them, then that's definitely something that you can reference with the prospect.
I love this. And then I just had one more. It's just a side note, but like if any of the audience is working like smaller SMB accounts, a solution to the 10K, even though they're not going to have one because they're public, is if they gotten funding. So if you go on Crunchbase or TechCrunch and they see that they have funding, they usually have some type of like PR newswire that specifically says, hey, we're going to be using this money to do blank. And so that's like the option if you're working more SMB. But I love this from like an enterprise perspective.
Yeah. There's another document that I really like, and that's the DEF 14A. It's lesser known. I actually heard about it on a prospecting podcast that I was listening to and thought, wow, how did I never hear about that? Because it's super valuable in that it actually will tell you exactly what your C-suite is being compensated on. And so, for instance, a trigger that is relevant to my company is when a company is going through a digital transformation. And so, for instance, this document is UPS's DEF 14A, and they have their Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer listed here. And so it's going to tell you exactly what his priorities are and what he's being compensated on. So if you do, and that's information that you can give to your AE, or if you're an AE, this is what you can use if you find yourself in the room with the C-suite. You can really, again, start to speak their language. And then another great relevant piece, every company has an executive peer group, and it's a list of other companies that they see as being similar to themselves. And if you have other enterprise accounts already as customers in your organization, sometimes they'll be in this list. And so you can be super specific on who you reference as a customer so that you can make sure that it's someone relevant to them. It might be someone you would not expect. For instance, they consider McDonald's a company that's relevant to them in that they have global operations, diversified business, and annual sales and market capitalizations comparable to UPS. So just another way to be super targeted and relevant in your messaging.
So I had a quick question on the DEF 14A. If you, and I'm going to make you work, but if you can go back to the similar companies, but I think this is so relevant in the similar companies aspect. So I'm curious, as like you being enterprise, if your company was like mentioned, like, if a current customer of Alation, right, was mentioned in one of these similar companies, are you going to reference that in an email possibly?
I have used that in an email. I used it because we had a virtual user conference that I was inviting prospects to, and I used the email, the subject line, mix and mingle with your data peers, and referenced that some of the customers that were in their executive peer group were going to be at this user conference presenting, and that I thought it might be relevant to them. And they actually responded and signed up for the conference. So I think this definitely works, especially when you're reaching out to the higher level prospects, because they're probably going to know that these people are in their wheelhouse.
Wow. And just more of a logistical question, Def 14As are similar to like 10Ks and 10Qs where it's filed by the company. So this is self-identified by the company, not like third-party identification.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Yes, and this is filed on a yearly basis. It usually comes out sometime in the spring, just after the 10K.
Question on my end. I'm curious, could you walk me through a little bit of how you would use kind of an executive's compensation package to leverage in your outreach?
Sure. So it actually, I didn't flag it in this one, but it might be something like they're comped on percentage of sales or something, or percentage of, increased productivity, especially for a chief strategy or transformation officer. And so if you can see exactly what their compensation is tied to, then you can have that in your mind, and also probably leverage it in some form of outreach as well. But I don't have it flagged right here exactly where it talks what it's tied to, but that's also in this document.
That's awesome.
No problem. That's
so yeah. I mean, it's subject to achievement of key business objectives. Payout is, and so it'll tell you what those key business objectives are, and things like that for each of the C-suite.
This is great. I've actually never seen this. It just seems like a holy grail for SDRs to.
That's what I thought.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, especially if you can speak to like an executive's key initiatives and their goals. If you know what they're thinking about, like before they go to bed, of like the decisions that lead up to the specific compensation. I think this is,
because that's what we're all thinking about at the end of the day, Sure.
And what's super important here too, and this is something that my SVP of sales at Okta says all the time, like every decision, whether you're selling, like toilet paper to like enterprise, whatever, it comes down to some type of cash, right? Or based off of revenue, right? So if you could save them revenue or save them time and energy, whatever it is, and looking here at like annual incentive awards, 16%, right? Achieving their business objectives, and then their base salaries on like a fixed cash compensation. So like, I love this. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I found a lot of value in it as well. I still have a lot to learn about what's in it, because it is a very comprehensive and detailed document, but just for, to get some immediate value, I think the executive compensation breakdown and the executive peer group is going to be two really good things that you can leverage right away. But another document that you can use is the 8K, which is similar to the 10K, except it's filed it's filed quarterly, actually. And so this is going to give you a snapshot of what took place in the last quarter and how they're adjusting moving forward. And so IDEX, another company that I've been looking into, has in this document how they've been affected by COVID, if at all, where they're being affected, and how they're responding to that. Another area that is very important is they go over their operating costs and liquidity management. So how are they doing money-wise? So they actually had to reduce their quarterly operating expenses by $25 million. Their C-suite had a 30% reduction in salaries and so forth. So, I mean, again, not something you mention in an email or in a meeting, but walking into a meeting, it's good to know. Again, just sort of high level information when you're going into these enterprise accounts and sort of gathering information for your account executive and for your own personal knowledge.
Right. Especially if you know that the company's in kind of savings mode and your product also saves them money, then you can definitely correlate that. So this is amazing.
Exactly. So yeah, that's pretty much it on the documents that I reference. I love the company website. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with looking into the blogs and press releases. The careers page can be a bit of a hidden gem, in my opinion. Not just the job postings, but a lot of companies post different marketing materials on what they're trying to accomplish. I work in the data space, and so this is super relevant to me. And they'll also mention different people in some of this collateral, and this could be a good target, and this could be a good piece of collateral to mention to them when you reach out. Say, hey, I read this article on your careers page. I found it really interesting, especially when you talked about such and such. That's something you can do on a cold call to immediately bring value and keep them on the phone and get them talking, because who doesn't like to talk about themselves? It's worked for me in the past.
That's how you got 115% quota. You just crushing it.
And then, so that's pretty much it for the research aspect. But getting into the targeted lead list building, I think this is super important, and I think it's really important to put a lot of energy into building a targeted lead list, because it's going to make the sales motions that much more impactful if you know that the majority, if not all of the people you're reaching out to are people that you want to be talking to. And so you don't have to waste as much time trying to get to the right person if you're pretty confident that these are the right people that I need to be talking to. And that comes from the preliminary research that you've already done into the account, and then also leveraging your sales tools like Sales Navigator, Zoom Info, and things like that. Once you've built the list, I think it's important to have it in one place and have all of your everything that you can leverage in the account in one place, so that as you this is just an example of one that I've been using in one of my accounts. So I keep track of every interaction that I've had with the people. I keep track of the collateral that I'm referencing whenever I reach out to them, and it's been super valuable. When I've been on the phone, I've been able to have everything in one place and then just click into, oh, we have an op open, here. We've spoken to this person, and I've been able to leverage that on the phone as I'm talking in real time, because you have it right there. So when you put the upfront work in, it's going to make the outreach that much more impactful, successful, valuable.
Efficient and scalable as well.
Yeah, this definitely scales. I actually employ something similar. It's more on a Google sheet because I'm able to do filters and stuff. But in this case, I think the same concept applies. You're trying to build this out, because something that I mentioned to at my former company, and something I'm still doing now as an AE, is that what happens if someone takes over your account and all your knowledge is up here? Well, that other SDR that takes over that account has no insight into what you're doing or saying. But in this case, you could be like, hey, Andy, or hey, whatever, here's all the information that I have. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely great for knowledge transfer and getting rid of, tribal knowledge that none of us want, but it's inevitable sometimes. But this definitely helps with that. And if your, AE needs to know what you've been up to, who you've been talking to, they can also look at that document and not have to Slack you or email you and say, hey, have you talked to this person? They can go and look and get an idea as well of what's happening.
Right. Yeah. We always hate it when AEs are breeding. on our backs. So
Yeah.
I love that document.
Like,
I'm
look
just
at
out
the
of curiosity.
document.
Right. Just out of curiosity from my end, because I have a lot of targets that it's hard for me to do this much research, though I want to. I'm just curious, probably the audiences as well. Like, what is your like account list, or like how many accounts do you get per quarter? How many targets are you going after? And how many people do you like generally do outreach to on like a week
Yeah.
or month basis?
So right now I'm supporting 3 AEs, and I have an account list of 30 accounts that I'm working this quarter. And I, at the beginning of the quarter, sit down with my AEs and figure out who the priorities are on this list, who's going to be a good target given the current economic situation and everything like that, and narrow it down to about 15 to go after in the quarter. And so I'm sequencing accounts. I'm researching accounts one week, and I'm sequencing accounts the next week. And I end up working probably 300 contacts in a quarter. So I put them in through an 11-step cadence through outreach, and yeah, that's the schedule that I'm on. And it can get overwhelming with doing this level of research, but like I said, I think it really pays off, and this is sort of what we've been tasked with. I know other outbound programs do different tiers and have outreach to different levels of buyers to try and get traction that way. And sometimes they're not even buyers, but you can get information about the account from like different levels of people. We've gone the super targeted direction where we're working sort of in tandem with our account executives to get in front of the right people. And so that's the approach that we're taking. But I've seen it done other ways where you're reaching out to a larger base of people doing less personalized outreach.
So I had a question there. Well, two questions. The first one is you mentioned how you get 30 accounts per quarter. Do you get a whole new set of accounts every other quarter? That's the first question.
Well, our outbound program is only 2 quarters old. And so, yeah, I did get a whole new set of accounts this quarter just because we had to iterate on the way we were doing things and, be flexible. Moving forward, I think where it's going to be more rolling into the next quarter and just assessing as we go and seeing how that works, because it's still sort of a new motion for us. So yeah, that's where we're at. But I think the idea is to not do the big heavy lift at the beginning of every quarter because it's a lot.
That is tough because, like, I'm sure you've gotten into your accounts and you finally built up some familiarity, and then boom, you're into new accounts. But
Yeah.
the second question I had, which I thought was interesting, and this is something that I did with my strat and enterprise AEs, is that I would actually have them like come over the top on some emails, depending on engagement rate or depending on conversations. So I'm curious to see how like you're working with your enterprise rep. Does he like just, or he or she just work specific contacts, or do they let you go after every contact, or, can you shed some insight there?
It depends. That's why I think it's relationship building is really important, and being in communication with your account executive, and like I said, working in sync and in tandem with them is really important because it depends on the account and the contact. So and whether or not we have traction, where he's at in the account and things like that. And so sometimes until we have traction, yes, I will do most of the outreach. If there's someone that I think an email should come from him or her, then I'll ask him to send an email to this person. Sometimes I might draft it, but we sort of communicate on what's going to be the best thing, because yeah, I think just psychologically, sometimes getting an email from an SDR, no matter how well it's written, someone, a CIO isn't necessarily going to want to take a meeting with an SDR, because why? So in that case, I do sort of ask him to send this email or something like that. Or sometimes I'll send it and say, hey, can you follow up saying my colleague Paige contacted you, just wanted to, so it's a mixture of things.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why you're the queen of the East, man. I mean, that
you have it
document
down
It's
to a science.
self-proclaimed, but no, I'm just kidding.
that document,
Yeah.
the document is next level, though. I mean, like, and to me, this is what separates that SMB rep to enterprise. If anyone in the audience is wondering, it's showing up, being prepared, and sharing these insights.
Yeah, and especially right now, I think when people are cutting back so much and making strategic decisions to sort of withstand the where we are right now. And so we have to be strategic in our outreach and in our sales plans and motions. We have to think a little bit more strategically, because inbound is not always going to cut it. Love the inbound, but you've got to go be strategic and go get it sometimes.
Yep.
So last but not least, wanted to touch on some outreach that has been successful for me. Again, being strategic, right now we have a sort of renewed focus on our customers and expanding within our customers. And so being able to work again with your account executive, get insight into what's going on in those accounts, and being able to reference that in an email is super valuable, or even in a LinkedIn message. Like here, where I basically called out where we are, who we're working with, asking if he's familiar, and leveraging this sort of softer call to action, not asking for specific time and date, but rather would it make sense for us to speak. And so, I got a good response from him and set this meeting up. And it's next Friday, so hopefully that will be a good one.
Let's go.
But yeah, also leveraging, specific customers and things like that, as I'm sure everyone's already doing. But
so I had a question. So first off, congrats on getting a response in 9 minutes. But also,
Right.
it looks like you're sending in-mails. Is that? I know there's some philosophy where people say, "I'm just going to send connections and wait till they accept." Some people say, "I'm just going to send in-mails." What is your strategy on that?
I send messages. So if they've connected with me, I send a message. If they haven't connected with me, I send an in-mail, because I have been contacted myself through an in-mail before that was very targeted and specific to me, and I felt, oh, that's kind of special, whenever I'm reaching out to people, I always think, is this something I would respond to? And so it's worked on me before, and I'm pretty savvy on these things, and so I think obviously it worked here too. And it's worked for me in the past, both ways, sending messages and in-mails. So one thing I usually do if they've connected with me, because if they've connected with me, I don't necessarily want to go straight for the meeting. I'll usually send them a resource first. And if they download that resource, or I can see that they've looked at it, then I'll say, ask for some feedback, or ask if they're interested in speaking further on it, or something like that. because again, if they've connected with me, then I see that as sort of, something that they've given me. And so I want to give them something in return, because you don't always want to just be asking your prospects for things.
Right. It's exactly what Josh Braun preaches. It's you want to make deposits to your prospect before asking for anything. And
yeah.
So I actually had a question on the email on the left. When I was a strat, SDR, and enterprise, I sometimes put somebody's name in the outreach if I saw that they were connected to them somehow. So I'm curious to see if you ever leverage names, because in this, like, we're working with the analytics team, right? Johnson & Johnson, or this whoever's account. This is a massive company, right? So analytics can mean a lot. Which is kind of the perk of working enterprise. But I'm curious to see if you ever leverage names in a direct message.
I'm always a little apprehensive to just start name dropping. But if I have some sort of rapport, if they've responded to my initial email, then I'll say, well, are you familiar with such and such on this team? But I tend to be a little bit more apprehensive on the name dropping tidbit. I haven't quite mastered how to do that without having them on a call. Now, once we get on a call, then I'm okay, once we've started talking and I'm like, okay, but sometimes I will use that sort of to, people will come to the call just to figure out who you're working with. And so again, that's something that you're giving them. And so I feel, I actually went through John Barrow's training, and he talks about the give get scorecard. And so to me, giving out a name is a give. So I would like to get something in return, like a meeting. So a meeting first, and then I'll tell you who we're working with. You've got to, I don't want to just be, again, giving everything to the prospect, because then it puts you in a position of, it puts you psychologically to them in a lower position. I would say, you just giving them things like that. And so you want them to respect you as an equal. And so you want to say, we can go over that on a call if you're free sometime next week.
Exactly. It really needs to be a partnership instead of just him asking you and you doing it for them.
So that's interesting. And I could also challenge a little bit as well, because I've done both approaches, because I'm a huge experimenter. So I wanted to see which one worked the best. So if you have a reasonable cause, a reason that you think that they're connected, you could still mention it. But what that does is it puts you 2 or 3 steps ahead of the deal cycle, because then it allows change to come in very fast. And that's kind of like, from an AE's perspective, you could also think of it that way. So like, instead of, because I've had people specifically like call me out, like, well, who on the analytics team? And it's like, whoa, like, let's calm down. But if you just kind of nip it in the butt right away, and they might say, oh, I actually don't know them, but I'm still interested. Or they'll say, oh yeah, I know them. And then if you have a good relationship, then they're going to talk you up. And then you're gonna bring silos together, which in enterprise, that's how deals are won, right? You have to get everybody on a consensus. So that's just a thought for anyone in the audience. If you want to experiment or try, like, totally try it out, see if it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the timing has to be right too, because I would say you have to have a little bit of knowledge too of the culture of the company as well, because sometimes people don't want to step on each other's toes and things like that. And so one way that you can spin it, if you're not going to drop the name, is to say, well, before, we connect the dots, I'd really like to get a good understanding of, what you're dealing with, what you need, and all of that type of thing before we bring the group together. I don't want to get all of that information sort of fuddled together, And again, using those psychology tactics, like, I want to focus on you, and things like that can help navigate sort of that choppy water.
Love it.
Yeah, and then I just wanted to share this one really quick. This is less, and when I use the term personalized, I don't necessarily mean like, oh, we went to the same school, or I saw you liked, the Golden State Warriors. I think personalization is more along the lines of something that is relevant specifically to that person, that has to do with their job, that's going to get them to think. And so this was an application developer in the data space. And so I wanted to highlight how we fundamentally changed how our clients organize their corporate data and reduce time to finding data from months to minutes. And so that's something that is highly relevant to an application developer in this space. And yeah, obviously he found it valuable to him at a meeting earlier this month.
Sick.
So yeah, that's pretty much it from me on the outreach side. One thing I would just add on is the importance of providing the value, and provide it fast and early, and as often as you can. I think every email counts and every interaction counts, because it could be the one that either makes or breaks it, and so you take that risk every time you send an email and make a call. And so, you should be bringing value each time.
So I have a question. And so it comes down to time management, and every SDR is like, oh my gosh, like this is great. This is some amazing insights, but I'm curious, like on your approach, like do you block out time to prospect every day? Is it, 2 hours, 3 hours cold email? Like how do you go about that?
Sure, I'll share my calendar with you guys on how I break up my day. So we obviously use the GCal, and so I just hide my work sort of schedule, and I have this daily schedule that I made that sort of keeps me on track. And I don't stick to this, no one can every day. But if I get off track, I know that around, 12:45, I should be calling the people that I couldn't get in touch with this morning. And at the end of my day, I should be preparing for what I'm going to do tomorrow. And, at the end of the week, I'm going to prepare, what accounts I'm going to reach out to, what accounts I'm going to research, what accounts I'm going to sequence, and things like that. And so what it does is it just holds you accountable in a way. And again, if you get sidetracked, you can always bring yourself back to where you need to be. And you can just create, if you're using Gmail, you can just go to other calendars and click create new, and you can turn it on or off if it gets annoying at some point, and or if you need it back, turn it back on. But that's pretty much how I keep myself on track whenever it seems like I have to boil the ocean.
And something I saw there too is, so you're primarily East Coast accounts, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's interesting that you're calling them. So like 7 a.m. Pacific, right? That's 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
their time. And then you call them at what time again? I was like, is it like in the afternoon, 4 p.m., 5 p.m.?
Yeah. So one would be between 4 and 5. And that's just usually whenever I'll call someone that I couldn't get a hold of in the morning. If I really wanted to talk to them, then I'll call them back in the afternoon. I saw a tidbit on LinkedIn that was an experiment someone had done on the effectiveness of the double touch phone call, because if you see a number call once, you're probably not going to answer. If you see it call back, then you're probably like, oh, let me see who this is. And you'll pick it up. So if I have time and it occurs to me in the afternoon that I need to call that person again, then that's typically when I'll do it. And I've seen higher connection rates between 4 and 5 because I think people are winding down. Sometimes they're maybe not even working at that point,
Yep.
just depending. So yeah, that's something that I started doing last quarter, and it works.
Awesome. Well, that is like so amazing. I'm gonna have to go back. I took away a lot of insights, and I'm gonna actually start implementing some of those in my outreach. It seems like the delivering the value, but what everybody wants to know is these rapid fire questions. The first one, we're gonna put you on the hot seat, is do you love to win or do you hate to lose?
I hate to lose. I really do. I really do. And the way that I keep myself from losing is I basically tell everyone exactly what I'm going to do, because then I have some intrinsic something in me. It means I have to do it. If I've told people that I'm going to do something, then I have to do it. And it works instinctively. I know like when I have to kick it into gear to make things happen. And yeah, to keep, I hate to lose.
That's amazing. It sounds like you love and embrace the pressure that comes along with that. Second question, who is your favorite thought leader in sales?
I really like Morgan Ingram. He is a sales trainer with John Barrows, and he actually came and trained my team, and I got my insights initially starting to outbound from him. He's really big into, how to research accounts, how to make the most of your time, just a pretty comprehensive person to pay attention to when it comes to sales.
Yeah, I love Morgan. When I was just getting into the SDR role, like he was a huge inspiration, hence why we actually started this podcast. It was actually
you gotta
like,
get him on.
Oh, we'll get
I'll
him on.
endorse you.
Shout out Morgan Ingram if you're listening. We want you on the show.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, based off of that, curious to see if you have any books you would recommend to the audience. We're huge book lovers, and this could be anywhere from business books to like fiction. Would love to get your recommendations.
Yeah, I have two that I really like, and the first one is Selling Above and Below the Power Line. That is a great book to read, especially if you're looking to make the move from SMB into enterprise sales, because it talks about how C-suite buyers and VP level buyers buy differently than below the power line buyers. They have different things that they're thinking about. They have different things that they're looking for. And it's really a different conversation. When you're talking below the line, it's more feature function. When you're talking above the power line, it's more solutions, outcomes, and return on investment. And so that's a great book to read. There's podcasts, based on the book that you can look into as well. And then the other book that I really like is not sales related at all, but it's called Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
Okay.
And if you're a woman in sales, I highly recommend reading that. It's just about basically undoing the training that we have received as women and being, your untamed self, your full potential. Don't make yourself small, like be, the best you that you can be. Because I also think that's important in sales, is having, a really strong level of confidence, because we get rejected so much. We're talking to, executives, all kinds of people every day. And so you've got to bring your best self,
Perfect. And with
and
that
you
best
can
self,
read it too.
right. And I was going to say, like, if after you read that book, maybe you'll race to Paige's success of getting Hulu as one of your big accounts. Last question. What is the biggest mistake you've made as an SDR, as well as some advice on how to prevent it?
I don't know that I've made any big ones, but they're just those ones that you're like, I just sent a template to someone, or like,
Oh.
you're like, it's just like those little small ones that get you. And the way to avoid that is to take breaks, I would say. And, don't, if your head's not in the game, take a breather, do what you need to do, get your head back in the game. Breaks are your friend, because you can make mistakes like that.
I love this. I mean, you're motivating me. I mean, get in the game. I mean, our whole audience, get in the game. So as a follow-up here, how can people reach out to you? Do you accept their request on LinkedIn?
Yeah, Paige Caldwell, look me up, connect, and happy to swap best practices and whatever it may be.
Oh man, I mean, you heard it here first. Go connect with Paige, find something of value that she wrote or that she had in our episode, connect with her in that personal message. And like, it was so awesome just to pick your brain, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun. You guys are awesome.
Awesome. You have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the SDR Live podcast. If you like this episode, please share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure you tune in next week and have a fantastic week.